Hey there, it's CJ Willie and I'm cracking a pack. Today is pack number 1 in Magic the Gathering Hour of Devastation Bundle Bingo. Check out my preview video for the explanation on how this Hour of Devastation Bundle Bingo will work. I've added the link to the preview video in the description below. So here we go. Gonna do Bundle Bingo with Hour of Devastation. So as a reminder, here is my bingo card. If I can get one of these squares today on pack number 1, I'll be able to mark off the free space as well, so I'll get 2 of them. So I've got all 10 of the packs from the bundle, and I've labeled them 1 through 10. And today we're going to do pack number 1. So let's zoom in just a little bit. There we go. Make it look good. Okay. So as I open up the pack and go through the cards, I'm going to be doing it through a very casual Magic the Gathering player viewpoint. I think it's a unique spin on rating Magic cards. And after I open the pack, I'm going to choose the best card out of the pack. Maybe you might agree, maybe you won't, but at least it'll be fun. So let's get to cracking this pack. All right, so our first card out of it is Kenra Scrapper for 3 mana, 2 and a red. It's a Jackal Warrior at 2/3. It has Menace. You may exert Kenra Scrapper as it attacks. When you do, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn. So red-white was a very aggressive strategy in Amonkhet, and with Hour of Devastation, red-white continued to be a very aggressive strategy in red-white. Red led the way with a lot of very aggressive creatures. Kenra Scrapper was one of those, and it was a good card. 2/3 for 3 is a little undercosted, but Menace, and when it attacks, it's a 4/3. Pretty hard to block, and that's gonna deal you 16 damage. So Kenra Scrapper was a pretty good card at common. Next we have Proven Combatant. So Proven Combatant is a single blue mana human warrior. It's a 1/1. Eternalize for 6 mana, 4 and 2 blue. So with the Eternalize, what would happen is once this creature dies, you could exile it from the graveyard, pay the Eternalize cost, and you would get a 4/4 black zombie human warrior. And then if it had any abilities with the Eternalize mechanic, it would keep those abilities as it was a 4/4 black zombie whatever. So Proven Combatant was, an early 1-drop. It usually would die, and if you had enough mana on turn 6, if you weren't dead by then, you could Eternalize it. Most of the time, if you're facing red-white, you were probably dead by the time you got to turn 6. Mummy Paramount is 2 mana, 1 and a white, zombie at 2/2. Whenever another zombie enters the battlefield under your control, Mummy Paramount gets +1/+1 till end of turn. This card appeared on face value to be a great card, but it just didn't really pan out in the red-white aggro strategy. And you could get it to work in white-black, but just giving it a buff, making it a 3/3 if you had a zombie play, sometimes wasn't the greatest. So in sealed, unless you had a few of these in the red-white aggro strategy, didn't really pay off that much. Lurching Rot Beast, 4 mana, 3 and a black. Zombie Beast is a 4/2, has cycling for a single black mana. This card is great in the cycling deck. Perfect in the cycling deck. So there's a blue-black cycling deck that was around. It would utilize God Pharaoh's Gift to get it back onto the battlefield as a 4/4. If you didn't need it, you could pitch it for a single black mana and get a card that you were needing. So it was a good card. Next we have Ronus' Stalwart. 2 mana, 1 and a green, human warrior. It's a 2/2. You may exert Ronus' Stalwart as it attacks. When you do, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn and can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less this turn. So it's a nifty card early in the game and more of an aggressive strategy, green-red, green-white, and attacking for a 3/3 and not being able to be blocked by smaller creatures was a pretty good deal. What I found is that this card severely dropped off in the later rounds, and so at best you might get in 2 attacks as a 3/3. That's 6 damage, but it didn't seem to be as aggressive as you'd want it to be. All right, next we have Crash Through. It's a single red mana. It's a sorcery. Creatures you control gain trample until end of turn. Draw a card. Funny story about this card. In our draft pod with the 4 of us in our play group, one of my friends was playing a red deck, and he kept casting this as an instant, targeting a single creature to give it trample and then draw a card. I wasn't paying attention to the card. He wasn't paying attention to the card. We played almost an entire round with it that way until I was like, hey, wait a minute, let's take a look at that card. Sorcery speed, all your creatures, not a single creature. And the card dropped way off at that point. So just kind of a funny story. I'm not a big fan of this card. It didn't really pan out well in like the red-white aggressive strategy. Next we have Manalith. 3 generic mana artifact. You can tap it, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. It was a card that in a slower format I think could have done a little bit of work, but the problem with the format being so aggressive, you couldn't take a turn off to play this, and it was really hard to color splash, because if you're color splashing, you're maybe a little bit of a slower deck. In the aggressive format of Amonkhet and Hour of Devastation, this card just was not that great. Next we have a single blue mana Unsummon. Return target creature to its owner's hand. I love Unsummon. It's one of my favorite Magic cards. The problem with Unsummon and Amonkhet and Hour of Devastation was if you're facing an aggro deck and you're trying to buy yourself some time, well, here's the problem. You would return their creature to their hand. Well, their creatures are so cheap that they'd be like, okay, well, you stalled me for a turn. I'm just going to replay my creature on second main phase and pass the turn. And if you didn't have a way to get another creature down or further your board, yeah, it stalled them off for 1 turn, but you were going to face that creature again and it was going to get you. In slower formats, Unsummon is awesome. You bounce their big creature, then on your turn you have time to establish your board, set them back a turn. Not Amonkhet and Hour of Devastation. I found it the hard way since I like playing blue decks. Desert of the Glorified is a land desert. Desert of the Glorified enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap it to add 1 black to your mana pool, or you can cycle it for 1 and a black. There is a common cycle of these deserts in Hour of Devastation. I liked them. Sure, they came into the battlefield tapped. They only tap for 1 color of mana, but the cycling effect really helped them out. Late game, you pitch it, go get what you need, or if you needed it as part of your mana base, turn 1 playing one of these is great. If you couldn't get it down in turn 1 or 2, later on in the game, you would just cycle it. Scrounger of Souls, 5 mana, 4 and a black. It's a horror, and it's a 3/4, has lifelink. This card I found in a couple of draft decks that I did that were black-green was a great card. If I can make it to the late game, especially if no one was playing red-white, which most people were, this for 5 mana was a little over costed, but I'd play it, and with lifelink I usually could stabilize my board. If I was getting hit for 4 damage, I'm going to get 3 of this damage back, or 3 life back. If it was a 3/4 for 4 and lifelink, would have been much better. Too often I was dead because I couldn't get to 5 mana, get this down, and stabilize my board. Alright, our first comment is Manticore Eternal. For 5 mana, 3 and 2 red, you get a zombie Manticore. It's a 5/4 with Afflict 3. Manticore Eternal attacks each combat of Fable. So this card was a beating. Afflict was a very hard mechanic to deal with, especially on the defense. No matter what, you're either going to take 5 or you're going to take 3. And this thing coming in every single turn in the red-white aggressive strategy, this was kind of on the top end. If you weren't dead by that point, when this came down, you had to block it, and even if you couldn't kill it, you were still going to take 3 damage. Afflict was a mechanic I didn't like as much because it seemed like you were always behind with Afflict. You'd block, you'd take out their creature, you'd still lose like 2 points. You'd block this, if your creature couldn't trade with them, you're still taking 3 points of damage. And a lot of times what would happen is this would come down on the board. On turn 6 it would attack, you'd block it, hopefully trying to kill it. There'd be some sort of combat trick. You'd take 3 damage, and then you would hope you'd have another creature you could play that would be able to block it, kill it, if you weren't already at 3 life. So Afflict was a kind of a tricky mechanic to deal with. Next card that we have is Riddle Form. 1 and a blue, it's an enchantment and uncommon. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you may have Riddle Form become a 3/3 Sphinx creature with flying in addition to its other types until end of turn. You could also have a Mana Seek where you could pump 3 mana into it, 2 and a blue, and scry 1. I wanted to make this card work so badly in the Amonkhet Hour of Devastation kind of draft time frame. I couldn't get it because you just didn't have enough time. You'd play it, you'd have to wait a turn, then you could cast a non-creature spell, you'd hit him for 3 damage, but you'd have nothing on defense. That's where this creature or this card really dropped off, was you just couldn't afford to take time off. Now, I am interested in trying to put it together in more of an eternal format, so maybe like a modern or pioneer deck. There are a couple of decks I have in mind where I could give it a try, but I've got better cards to play versus this particular one. Final uncommon is Obelisk Spider. 1 generic, 1 black, and 1 green. It's a spider that's a 1/4. It has reach. Whenever Obelisk Spider deals combat damage to a creature, put a -1/-1 counter on that creature. Whenever you put a -1 or more -1/-1 counters on a creature, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So in draft, I did play a black-green deck featuring 2 of these. I got lucky enough to draft both of them. And having a theme around putting -1/-1 counters on black and green creatures, it was a fun deck. I won, I think, pretty much all the games that I played where I got both of these out, simply because I was able to pop their creatures off and, you know, ride it to victory. So it was definitely a fun card. In fact, in that environment, during the Amonkhet Hour of Devastation kind of standard environment, I did have a black-green -1/-1 counters deck that I had some success with, not a ton, but this was a decent card. All right, we're to the rare and mythic rare. We haven't been able to mark off any of the squares yet, so hopefully in Hour of Devastation Bundle Bingo, we will mark one off in our first pack. So here we go. Gonna take a look at it, and we have a mythic. Anish Crucifix Sovereign. 6 mana, 4 and 2 blue. It's a legendary creature, Sphinx. It's a 4/4 flyer. Sphinx spells you cast cost 2 less to cast. Whenever Eunice, Cryosphinx Sovereign, or another Sphinx enters the battlefield under your control, reveal the top 4 cards of your library. An opponent separates those cards into 2 piles. Put 1 pile into your hand and the other into your graveyard. I like this card quite a bit. I did draft it in our Hour of Devastation draft pod, where the 4 of us in the play group get together. The problem was I never got to play it because I was playing my friends who were more aggressive, and my blue control deck, either blue-white or blue-black, just couldn't hold up, and so I never got to cast it once. Currently, I do have this in a Pioneer deck. It's a very Esper control deck that basically has on about a handful of creatures, all of those creatures being Sphinxes, and I utilize Eunice's ability to be able to, once I've controlled the board and kept it pretty stable, I start putting out the big Sphinx flyers and utilizing these sort of effects that come with some of the other, you know, Sphinxes I have in the deck. So I do like Unash quite a bit. It's a card that like I said, I currently feature in a deck. Now that I have 2 of them, I'm going to have to figure out a way to get this other one in there so that I can, you know, really benefit off of the casting cost reduction and then the ability. Okay, other cards that we have: Full Art Plains and a Warrior Vigilance 1/1 token. So best card out of the pack, in my opinion, or my favorite card out of the pack, would really be between Obelisk Spider and Unesh. I'm going to go with Unesh because that's a card that I currently play in a deck. Although I was able to get this out in draft because it was a little bit cheaper in cost, I really think that if I had been able to get this guy out, I would have been able to do some things. There were a couple of Sphinxes that were in the Hour of Devastation, Amonkhet kind of era, and so it's a card that I wished I would have been able to play in draft and had some fun with. Wasn't able to, but currently in a Pioneer deck that I play, I do play it, and I have quite a bit of success with that deck. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did like it, please subscribe and share. Take some time to tell me in the comment section what was your favorite or best card out of the pack. Until next time, when I am back to crack the next pack in the Magic the Gathering Hour of Devastation Bundle Bingo.